If you're in the middle of a PCS right now, or you know one is coming, this series is for you. Because PCS isn't just about boxes and checklists. It's about the waiting, the unknowns, the goodbyes, and starting over in a place that doesn't feel like home yet. I'm moving into my 9th home in the last decade, and what I've learned is this: PCS isn't just a move, it's a life transition. So let's walk through it together. If you're listening to this episode, there's a good chance a PCS is somewhere in your life right now. Maybe you're waiting on orders, maybe the movers are coming soon, or maybe you're staring at a house full of boxes wondering how you got here. This summer on the podcast, I'm doing something a little different. I'm in the middle of my own PCS right now, and after moving into my 9th home in the last decade, I thought it might be helpful to walk through the PCS process together. Not as an expert, but as someone who's lived it a lot. Because PCS isn't just a move, it's a life transition. Every week in the series, we're going to talk honestly about what this process actually looks like. The logistics, the emotions, and the parts no one really explains until you're in the middle of it. Welcome to More Than a Milspouse, the podcast for military spouses who want to live with more meaning and less overwhelm. I'm your host, Christine, seasoned military spouse, mom of 3, life coach, and your guide to intentionally designing a life you're excited about as a military spouse. I'm here to help you get the clarity you need so you can get unstuck and unlock your purpose and potential. Because you, my friend, are more than a milspouse. You have something valuable to offer. And when you pursue the things that light your heart on fire, you trade frustration for fulfillment and isolation for a life of impact. It's time to discover who you are meant to be, because together we can change the world. Hi friend, if you're listening to this, it means I'm in the middle of my own PCS. So this summer on the podcast, we're doing something a little different, a PCS Survival Series. Think of it as an honest guide to navigating military moves from someone who's done this a time or two. This series walks through the PCS process from beginning to end so you can come back to it anytime you find yourself here again. Today, we're starting at the very beginning. We're talking about the waiting game, that space between thinking you might be moving and actually having orders on hand. This series really came from 2 places. First, a very real need to have something to share with you while I'm in the middle of yet another PCS. I've learned after doing this a few times while running the podcast that it's actually really hard to keep the podcast going in the middle of a move. This is our 5th year of having the podcast. This is my 4th move since starting the show, which seems really crazy to say. But yes, I needed something to share with you as I was in the middle of my own PCS, and I started thinking, maybe it's time for me to talk more about PCSing. I used to say that I did not want to be known as a PCS expert. Moving was just something I did, not something I really talked about, not something I was an expert at. There are other people that are experts on the PCS process, but then I kept moving. And at some point I thought maybe the value isn't being an expert on the best way to do this. Maybe it's in actually sharing what this feels like, doing it over and over again. So that's what this series is. Each week, we're going to walk through a different part of the process, the practical side, the emotional side, and what it looks to live through it in real time. So today we're starting at the beginning of the process before orders ever arrive. Today we're talking about what I like to call the waiting game. And as I was thinking about how do I put together this series, how do I share all of this with you? I thought, I've had so many crazy stories, so many crazy PCSs. Maybe I just share parts of the process. So today I'm taking you back to my very first PCS, back to a time when I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. We had been married for almost 2 years, and I had not had to move yet because when my husband and I met, he had PCSed to a place where I was already living. We got married, so I still had my friends, my career. Nothing had really shifted for me. And then one day, my husband called me at work, basically dropped a bomb on me, said, "Hey, I have orders to move. I have to leave in 3 weeks." And in 3 weeks, he packed up our entire house and headed out. And at the time, I was not in a position where I could leave my job yet. And I remember thinking, what in the world is happening? Because now I just have this empty house that we're trying to sell. And at that point, I come home from work one day, all of our stuff is in boxes. The next day, it gets loaded on a truck and disappears. And now I'm like, okay, where am I going to sleep? Am I going to sleep on the floor? I ended up couch surfing with friends for several weeks until I got to a place where I could leave my job and then go join my husband, who was at a training school en route to our next assignment. But at the time, I had no idea what this process was like, what I was getting myself into. I had no idea that I was going to spend a couple of months couch surfing, followed by a couple of months living in a rented apartment, followed by not being able to get our stuff delivered and having to spend a month on an air mattress. It was a lot for a first PCS where I had no idea what was going on. Now, almost 17 years later, I understand the process a lot better. But here's the thing that I've learned. PCSing is less about having everything perfectly planned and figured out, and a lot more about learning how to live with uncertainty. And this phase, the waiting game, is really where it starts. It's the part of the moving process where you don't have all the information yet. You can't make concrete plans. You feel a little bit stuck. Maybe you just know that a move is coming or a move is possible, or you've been told you're probably moving to a specific location, but there's no orders or anything. You're just in the waiting game. And if you're someone who likes to plan ahead, like me, this part can feel especially hard. And learning to live with the uncertainty, the inability to plan long term is definitely a skill, and it's one that I've had to learn the hard way. But learning this skill is way more important, in my opinion, than whether you have a pretty printed PCS binder, whether you have neat little checklists to check everything off, and whether you have got labels or pictures of all of your belongings. So the real question when it comes to the waiting game is, how do you navigate a season where there's so much unknown, where you can't plan more than a few months ahead? Here are a few things that have helped me over the years. Number one is acceptance over control. The tighter I try to hold everything together, the more I get frustrated. The more that I'm like, but I made this plan, and now this plan is blown to bits. And it's easy to get frustrated. But the more that I can say, okay, let me accept that I can't control the outcomes of this, and I have to just sit in the unknown. And the more that I practice doing that, the easier it becomes. The second part of this is you can make plans, but you hold them loosely. I actually really recommend planning, but only up to a point. It is absolutely fine to think ahead, to say, okay, we think we want to move around this timeline. We want to take a trip in between locations. We think we want to be able to take this much time off. We think we want to be settled by this point. We do make plans, but we also hold all of them loosely because timelines shift. A lot of times you don't have the information you need until the last minute, which is kind of frustrating, but true. And the more that you're able to say, yes, here's my plan, and also I know my plan is probably going to change, the easier it is to navigate the whole process. The third thing that I have learned over the years is that stuff is just stuff. I know we like to say this is like very meaningful to me. This is the thing that I always wanted. But if you can release that, it makes the moving process so much easier. Most of the furniture we have is stuff that is already beaten up, scratched up at this point. I don't have any love lost for most of the furniture in our house. And we typically buy furniture with the idea that it's going to get beat up over time. The one exception to my PCS proof furniture, I think at the moment, is the fact that I bought myself a corner desk, which I love. I love how much space the desk gave me. But what I learned in our last PCS is that it does not come apart and get put together easily. I felt so bad for the movers as they are like trying to figure out how to put this desk back together. And I was like, I should have bought a desk that was easier to PCS. But that is the decision point that I used for most of the furniture and stuff in our home. It is just stuff. It's going to get scratched. It's going to get broken. But it works, right? And we can make the most of it. We buy things expecting that they're going to get a little bit damaged along the way. Someday, I'm going to buy furniture that I truly love and I don't want to get scratched up. That is my long-term goal. But for the most part, I just let it go and let it be what it will be. And know that it's not perfect, but stuff is just stuff. And the less that I hold tightly to my stuff looking a certain way, the more I enjoy the process. The fourth thing that I have really learned in this whole process is to look for the good, because you're going to find whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for the things that frustrate you, the things that are going wrong, you're going to see that. And if you look for the good, you will see that. Even in the midst of uncertainty, there is always something good to find if you're looking for it. You know, I think back to that first PCS when I had no idea what I was getting into, and there was still a lot of good in that. There was the fact that I had so many friends that were willing to offer me a place to crash while I was waiting to go join my husband. There were friends throwing me birthday parties when my husband couldn't be there because he was at training. There was just a lot of good and a lot of fun that came out of that season while we were living on the road and not really tied to a whole lot of commitments, right? When I eventually quit my job and I came to join my husband at training, we still had a couple of months before his next assignment. So when he was not at training, it wasn't like I had a job. It wasn't like we were involved, tied to a community. So we could just go explore and have fun together in a way that we hadn't had time to do when we were very involved in organizations and commitments at a specific duty station. There is always something good, even in the midst of the hard, if you look for what's good. The fifth thing that really helped me over time was to just learn to live open-handed. This PCS season of life will ask you to let go of a lot over and over again. And the more tightly that you hold to things looking a certain way or being a certain way or having a certain thing available to you, the more frustrating it gets. But the more that we live open-handed and embrace what's new, what's different, even if it's not what's familiar, the easier life gets. This was really important, especially the year that we moved to Guam, because you saw two camps of people. There were the people that loved living on this island, and there were the people that hated living on the island and could not wait to get off. But over and over again, I saw the people that came to the island that hated it, wanted things to look and feel exactly like they did back home, wherever they were from. And living on a remote island in the middle of the Pacific is not like living on the continental US, where you have easy access to Amazon Prime and all these things. You can get stuff on a remote island, but you have to give it time to get there. You have to know that not everything is going to ship to the island. So the more that you hold to life looking a certain way, the harder it is. The more that you live open-handed, the more that you will enjoy the ride. And then I think the most important thing that I have learned over years of PCSing is to support your nervous system. This matters more than I think almost anything else, because PCSing isn't just about the logistics. It's an emotional process. There's a lot of letting go. There's a lot of change. And that's not something that always comes easily to us. So we have to take time to care for ourselves and our nervous system in the process. So when I think about what I've learned through PCSing over the years, and specifically about the waiting game, this time where you think you might be moving, but you're not yet, you don't have all the pieces in place, right? It's a lot of mindset. It's a lot of learning to deal with the uncertainty. And there's a lot of unknowns, right? And that feeling of unknown, uncertainty, not feeling like you can move forward yet, that can feel really uncomfortable. So as I think through the waiting process and I think through all that I've experienced and learned, there are a few things that I wish someone would have told me about this part of the process. And so it boils down to these three things. I wish someone would have told me assignments can and do change. Even when you think things are set, even when you think you're going to a specific location, it could always change. And to have that in mind, because it's easy to lock onto a specific location, especially if it's a location you're excited about, and then something shifts. And then you are all the work that you did to prepare for this one location, and that can feel even more frustrating. So know going into any PCS that an assignment can change. Know that you won't always have a great timeline. I laugh at some of the checklists that assume that you get orders months in advance. Because more often than not, we haven't gotten orders until late in the process. In her book, Military Culture Shift, Corey Weathers, who we had on the podcast, I'll try to link that in the show notes, but she talked about there was a group of military spouses that came together in the 1980s to begin advocating for military families to get orders 6 months in advance of their move so that they could put all the pieces in place, so that they would have enough time to prepare, and so it would cause a lot less stress on military families. And yet, here we are, 40 some odd years later, still trying to execute last minute moves. None of that has happened yet, right? We still have people that are like, could I get a little more advance notice instead of still having to wait until the last minute to get our orders? So I want to say up front, because I wish somebody would have told me, you're not always going to have advance notice. You're not always going to have a great timeline or the timeline you want for your move. And then last but not least, I wish someone had told me stress is a part of the process and emotional fatigue is absolutely normal. Even if it feels like nothing is happening in the waiting game in this first part of the season, it can still feel exhausting because your brain wants to think ahead. It wants to plan. It wants to think about all the future possibilities, and you can't because you're waiting. And then you feel stressed because you don't know what's coming because of the uncertainty. So what can we do in the waiting? Number one, we take care of ourselves. We learn what we can about what's next, and we focus on being present right where we are. If you are in the waiting game right now, here's one small thing that might help. Take a few minutes and write down what you want the moving season, or what I call PCS season, to feel like. Not what you think it needs to look like, not the logistics, but just how you want to feel through the whole process. And then choose 1 to 2 small actions that will support you in that process. For me, one PCS, it looked like committing to walking 10,000 steps a day. I knew we were going to be traveling and living out of a suitcase for over a month, and I said, what do I want to do to support myself in this season? And that summer, it was get yourself 10,000 steps a day. And it gave me something to focus on to support myself in the middle of the chaos. So if you are in a season of waiting, I see you. I've been there. I want you to know you're not doing it wrong. But the more that we learn to live with uncertainty, we build this skill, the easier we will be able to navigate these seasons of PCSing and change. And if this is something that you have struggled with and you're looking for a little more support, I am not taking one-on-one clients right now because I'm in the middle of a PCS, but once we get settled, I'll be opening up a limited number of coaching spots. And if you want to be the first to know when those open up, you can join the waiting list by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to milspousemastermind.com/waitlist. There is a lot of uncertainty in the waiting game, but hopefully the more that we talk about it, the less powerless you feel, and the more that you feel empowered to move through it with more clarity and a little more peace. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode and what has helped you in the waiting game. Feel free to message me on Instagram or join the conversation inside the More Than a Milspouse community on Facebook. I'll be back next week with another episode in the PCS Survival Series. Until then, may you live filled, fueled, and full of joy. Hey, amazing Milspouse, before you go, I want you to know that I love hearing from you. The More Than a Milspouse community exists to help you thrive as a military spouse. Figure out what lights your heart on fire and empower you to live with purpose and impact. You can have an incredible impact simply by heading over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. But your impact doesn't stop there. You can empower those around you simply by sharing an episode with a friend or neighbor, someone who needs a little encouragement in this military life. And if this episode was meaningful to you, spread the love by taking a screenshot of this episode and tagging me on Instagram so we can continue to reach more people, change more lives, and shift the way that military spouses look at life. Because we are better together, and together we can change the world. let's do it.